The Bible is full of many, many sayings of wisdom and stuff like that. And actually, some of them are even, some people will say, Confucius say, and then what they're saying actually comes from the Bible. A lot of people have no idea that what they're quoting is really a statement from the Bible. And some of those people, if you told them, did you know what you just said comes from the Bible? They probably would never say it again. And that's sad, actually. Here are just a few. And some of these you may not realize come from the Bible. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Am I my brother's keeper? You remember the story of Cain and Abel. Land of milk and honey. It's where the Israelites were going when they left Egypt, remember? An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I think that's one of the Old Testament 650 laws that are listed in there. The word scapegoat comes from the Bible. Man does not live by bread alone. You know who said that? Jesus, when he was being tempted. Apple of my eye. God talking about the nation of Israel. A man after my own heart. Nothing but skin and bones. Here, I could make a sermon out of every one of those. That's about 9 or 10 good sermons right there. And here are some others. He who spares discipline hates his children. You know that as spare the rod, spoil the child. Pride comes before a fall. There's nothing new under the sun. A drop in the bucket. See eye to eye. There's no rest for the wicked. Rise and shine. And here's a good one. The powers that be. And the truth will set you free. And then fight the good fight. All of those phrases can be found in the Bible, in one translation or another, in those exact words. A lot of those are directly from the King James or the New King James Version. And that's just a few examples. And all of those continue to be relevant in our lives today and applicable to our daily lives. They offer wisdom, they offer guidance, and can help us navigate through certain situations that we might get in. Well, today we're going to look at one other that I didn't mention. This one is not as commonplace. You may have not actually heard it before. You probably have, but you may have not really thought about it. But it's a good one. As many of these others, some of these others that I just read did. This one comes from Proverbs. Proverbs 3, verse 27. Chris.
Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in the power of your hand to do so.
Now some people might read the first part of that verse, do not withhold good from whom it is due, and use it to justify socialism. Give everything to everybody that needs it or wants it or deserves it. You know, give them everything they want. Well, that's not what that's saying, because there's more to that verse. Many times people will take a verse in the Bible and they'll use just the first part. Just like the one, judge not. There's a whole lot more to that verse. If you don't believe me, read it. There's more to that, you know. Just like this one, don't withhold good from people. There's more after that in this verse, and that's what we're going to talk about. I agree with giving someone what they deserve. I agree with that in a positive way as well as a negative way. I'm not saying I believe in corporal punishment, but I do believe in punishment if it is deserved and it's due. I do believe that. It's a good deterrent sometimes. I was at a seminar recently in Alexandria, part of work, and they had this nationally known speaker there. And he was talking about how he started on the assembly line and he worked his way up to being floor plant manager. And I raised my hand and he said, yes. And I said, well, you know, my mama always told me that workers will rise to their level of incompetence. He didn't call on me again that day. But he was talking about positive reinforcement. And he's saying that that's all we need to do. We need to give positive reinforcement. Pat them on the back, even when they do something wrong. Pat them on the back and then show them how to. And I was thinking, no, that's not me. Some of you may feel that way. Tony, you may feel that way at work. You know, you don't want me to tell you to do something wrong. Just say, good job, good job. But why would you do that with someone that needs some negative reinforcement? You know, sometimes I feel that it's good to discipline someone when they do something wrong. If you don't, they're liable to end up at a Coldplay concert ruining your company. There are two very distinct parts to this verse about giving good to others. First, and this Solomon more than likely wrote this. He wrote most of the Proverbs, almost all of it, just like David wrote most of the Psalms, but not all of them. Same thing with Proverbs and Solomon. He's saying, do not withhold good to those of whom it is due. They earned it. They need it. They deserve it. It's due them for their efforts. If you ever need an argument against affirmative action, there it is. And you should agree with me on that. If you don't, that's fine. I'm a true believer in giving someone what they are due if they have earned it and they deserve it. But there's even more to this verse we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But give someone their due, both good and bad. Both positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. There is a proper way to do negative reinforcement, but that's not what we're talking about today. I've said that, I'm not going to mention that again. In this chapter 3, Solomon had been talking to that point about how a person should be. Most of the first part of chapter 3, Solomon is saying, you should keep the law, you should trust in the Lord, you should depart from evil, you should find wisdom, you should be discreet. Yes, he says that. You should be discreet. Proverbs 3, Solomon says that. And so on. He says all those things, and he says, if you do all these things, your sleep will be sweet. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Have trouble sleeping at night? Read the first 3/4 of Proverbs 3, and it'll tell you how to have sweet sleep. I don't know what sweet sleep is. It's probably like I got last night because I was very tired. You did too, darling. You slept well. But I think that's pretty cool, how to learn how to have sweet sleep. After that part, he's talking about you. Then he starts talking about others. What you should do to and for others. And that's what this verse 27 is about. Do not withhold good from others if it is due. This good that Solomon mentions here is something that we're obligated to give if it is due. But he's not really saying just give them stuff. What Solomon is implying and actually stating here is treat them correctly. Treat them the way they should be treated. Treat others right. It's not necessarily giving them things. Actually, the modern meaning of our word honor would probably fit better here than giving them something. Honor them. In other words, respect them and help them when you can. When something good is expected or owed, then you should seek to fulfill that commandment for them. And honor can take on many different forms. A child, the 5th commandment, should honor their mother and father. That means respect and mind them. Parents should honor their children also, meaning you should bring them to church, bring them up in a life with Christ and with God, and teach them the right way to live. That's honoring them. Because the children are given to us, we're stewards of our kids. God gives them to us for 15, 20 years to bring them up, to be good stewards for them, and then hopefully they can go out into the world and continue to be good people. That's what it means by honoring. Parents should honor their children. Employees should honor their employers by working hard and sincerely, enjoying it. And just like the same way, employers should honor their employees fairly. You know, if you've got an employee that's doing a good job, do something for them. You know, a promotion, a gift of appreciation, a pay raise. You heard it right, Tony. He's over there saying, yeah. I mean, young people should honor and do good for elderly people. It's their duty. And don't you think elderly people have earned that right to be honored by younger people? It's due them, right? Just like Solomon said. If it is due them, give them that good. Give them that honor, that respect. He's talking about all these things. I'm going to get some comments on this one. But this comes straight from 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 17. This is how I interpret it. It says, church members should honor their spiritual leaders by paying them well for their faithful service. No, what it means is that you should, that's what it means. But the other place says you should lift up your church leaders. Honor them also. Just like I honor all of you by trying to tell you something every Sunday that'll maybe lift up you in your life to make you a better person. And now we talked about what's due, not to withhold that good from people. Let's look at the second part of that verse. It says, when it is in the power of your hand to do so. When it is in the power of your hand to do so. That's how that verse ends. That's a lot. That says a lot right there. It can mean that, well, let me give you an example first. Something that we used to own a condo. And without using a whole lot of sense, I got elected to the HOA board. And then immediately was elected president of the HOA board. If you ever have the opportunity, decline. Believe me, decline it. But there was a man that was on the board, there were two of them actually, that had been on there for like 15 years. And one of them's name was Ed Black. Ed Black is the president of a large asphalt company that does road work all over South Mississippi and South Louisiana and South Alabama. Big company. He was the president. I sent Ed a letter. And I told him, I said, I appreciate all that you've done for this complex in the many years that you've been here. And he called me and he said, Steve, you're the first person to ever thank me for what I've done here. And I've done a lot. And I said, I know, Ed, you really have. You've taken off time from your work and you deserve that honor of being respected for what you've done and thanked. And that was what it was. It was what he should have been. He deserved it. And I had the opportunity to say something to him to show him that I appreciated what he had done. And that's one of the things that this verse is talking about, doing things like that. Telling someone, you know, you've done a good job. That's easy. It says, when it's in the power of your hand to do so, that's easy, something like that. Someone does something for you, or just tell them, you've done a good job. We appreciate it. I appreciate it. I appreciate the work Tony does on his job. They love him. He works hard. He shows up, works hard, and we've not had any problems with him other than him crippling the boy about the first week he was there. That's another story I can tell you. But, you know, that's just one example. But it's important to remember that give these things to others when you can. God didn't mean for you to put yourself in a bind to help other people. That's not his intent. It could mean that you have the resources or the money to help other people. Sure, it could mean that. It could also mean that you're in a position to show appreciation and make a decision about that person. It could mean that you can just encourage someone that's needy and needs help and tell them, look, I'll help you find someone to help you. Those things you have the power in your hand almost all the time to do. A kind word to someone who you know is having a hard time. A phone call to a friend or a family member. Just to ask them how they're doing, just to talk for a few minutes. I told y'all about my aunt in Dallas. I called her at least every other week, and we talked for about 30 minutes, and she said, Steve, you're the only one that calls just to talk. Everybody else wants something. And I call my siblings about every other week at least, and just to talk to them for a few minutes. You know, 2 of them call me when they want something. But just that's something that you can do. It doesn't mean you have to have money and resources to do stuff for other people. That's not what this verse means. You think of all that we as members of this church have done for other people, especially at the school, just like we're doing now, helping the young kids who don't have their family, unfortunately, does not have the resources to purchase what those children need to get a good education. You know, and hopefully they're telling these children, the church did this for you. And in a few years, those children may get a little older and they say, well, I'm going to go find out what this church is. They're helping people. Maybe I can help other people that way too by getting involved in that church. You can always do good for someone. It also means that you should fulfill your commitments. If you make a promise to someone, because you know that it's something you can do, fulfill it. Live up to it. Don't let them down. That's the opposite of honor. That's the opposite of honoring them. Because if you make a promise to someone, hopefully it is in your power to do that thing that you promised, that commitment, and you should do it. You need to use your resources, your skills, your influence, whatever it needs to be to benefit other people any way that you can. Then you do those things. But like I said, don't put yourself in a bind, because that was not God's intent. And it also implies that you should not procrastinate. You should not delay. When you see someone that has a need, address it. Don't put off calling someone that you need to call and talk to. I did that. And my nephew's no longer with me. So when you know someone has a need, call them and talk to them. Because most of the time, it's an immediate need. So don't procrastinate. Once again, fulfill your promises and commitments. Be generous with your time, talents, and resources. Offer practical help when you can. Offer words of encouragement. It doesn't have to be financial assistance. Simple kindness and compassion to those around you. And this verse really tells us to reflect God's character, doesn't it? God's character is love, because the Bible tells us God is love. That's really what this verse is telling us to be. And you remember the song, they will know we are Christians by our love. In essence, Proverbs 3:27, which is printed on the front of your bulletin, calls us to be proactive, to be looking for people to help and people in need and things that we can do. It's our responsibility to help others, and it also benefits us. It shows that we're more compassionate, and it makes this a more compassionate world to live in. So where and how can you do good for others if it's in your power to do so? Think about that. In this church, we help our school a lot, and we will continue to do so. There's a need, it's an immediate need, and we are addressing it when it is in need. That's what we're doing. We have, as a church, the resources to do that. You have all been so very, very generous in your giving to this church. We have the resources, right, Cheryl, to do things like that for the school. Our scholarship, we've already got enough to pay next year's. Just barely, though, so continue to give. We may increase it. But don't you know that if God wants you to do good for someone, He will present that person and that person's need to you, and He will give you the resources to do it. Amen.
Amen.